I remember being 5 or 6 years old and I had this little Sony portable CD player and I would carry that thing everywhere. And when I think back to the CDs that I constantly had in it, it was the NSYNC self-titled and No Strings Attached album, and it was the Backstreet Boys self-titled and Millennium album. I used to listen to those literally every single day. I knew every single word, and I grew up loving pop music of the late 90s and early 2000s, especially because at that time I lived in Orlando, which is, where all of those bands were kind of formed. So it just feels really, really nostalgic to me. And being that this is a pop music channel, we've had a ton of requests on how to recreate a song from the late 90s and early 2000s. So that's exactly what we're going to do in this tutorial today. I'm going to produce, write, and construct a song that sounds like it would have been by NSYNC or Backstreet Boys or 98 Degrees from the years of like 1996 to 2003. But before we hop in, I just have a really, really quick and special announcement. Earlier this week, we released our brand new sample and preset pack. It's called Y2K, and it's 511 samples and 105 synth presets for the free version of Vital, and they're all inspired by those pop, hip-hop, and R&B records of the late 90s and early 2000s. So we have a bunch of stuff that will fit like NSYNC and Backstreet Boys, but we also drew a lot of inspiration from like the hip-hop and pop crossovers of like Pharrell, Timbaland, all of those kind of acts that really were just filling the charts of the late 90s and early 2000s. So again, it's 511 samples, it's 105 synth presets that do work on the free version of Vital, and the pack is 100% royalty free. If you want to check that out after this video, head to makepopmusic.com. That pack is normally $40. However, for the first week or so, we're going to be selling it for $30. So if you like a lot of the sounds that you hear in this video, and if you want tons more that are inspired by the late 90s and early 2000s, go grab the pack, especially while it's at its intro price of $30. But let's go ahead and let's dive in and start looking at how to make a boy band song from the late 90s and early 2000s. So to start, I have a tempo of 110 that feels pretty good. Everything around this kind of generation kind of had a nice beat to it. None of it was like super, super, super crazy upbeat, and some of the ballads got slower, but this will be a good little start. I'm going to start by just arranging a pretty basic kind of drum construction, and then we're going to build off of that. Okay, so here's what I have just for a basis. I want something that feels a little bit upbeat, and a lot of the acts at this time used quite a bit of swing, especially Max Martin was really inspired by like New Jack Swing of the early and mid 90s. So we're going to kind of be inspired by that. We're going to use a kick called Brick. We're going to use 2 snares. So we have this wide snare called Wide Vibes, and we have this kind of punchy snare called Splat. And then we have these background snares that I just called NSYNC. And then we have the Mickey Mouse hi-hat. So here's what all of these drums sound like. This is going to kind of be the basis for what I think will probably end up becoming the chorus. Let's go ahead and let's start layering some of those big synths. I kind of want to have those orchestra hits and those big basses, similar that you'd hear in like Everybody Backstreet's Back, or that you would hear in like It's Gonna Be Me. So let's go ahead and let's start punching some of that in. So what I want to start with is this kind of orchestra hit. This was like such a huge sound of the 90s and 2000s. So we have one in the new Y2K pack. We have them as samples and as synth presets. And really that's going to kind of give us our basis. So let's go ahead and hear that. A lot of the songs in this era were kind of written in minor keys, and a lot of them used like harmonic movement where they would just shift up one semitone. They used a lot of dissonance, actually, so like you'll hear it right here. Max Martin would really go in between major and minor keys quite a bit in a song, so don't be afraid to use some wrong notes here and there. It really adds that nice little bit of vibe. So we have that for our main hit. We're going to layer that with this big bass called Out of Sync, and it's just this big, wide, crunchy bass. And now what I want to do is I want to layer up some synths just to give us a little bit of extra oomph. So there we have this key called Harp On. It's actually really pretty, but if we play it in a lower octave, we can get this. And that's going to give us a little bit of width. And then we have this little broken stereo preset on the back, giving us some counter melody because that was huge in all of these like really produced 90s bands. And then we just have these extra kind of call and response house pianos that are called Bring On to House. So there's a lot of like call and response in this kind of era of pop music. So we'll go ahead and listen now. What I want to do is I want to go ahead and add a little bit of intro because I think we're going to go like 4-bar intro into this little 4-bar kind of like melodic instrumental section, and then we'll go into a verse. So I'm going to write a little bit of intro, and I'm going to pop some keys and effects and stuff like that in there as well. All right, so for the intro, I'm going to do strings, very inspired by like Bye 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 or No Strings Attached or really any of those other like NSYNC songs. So we have the Martin Special. And these are velocity tracks, so if you want to play it at a velocity, you absolutely can. And then we're actually layering that with this mellow vibe synth. So it is also a string, but it's a little bit more digital, similar to like a Mellotron. So we're just playing those in a minor scale, and then we just have a couple different risers and transition effects, and these are really going to kind of add to that like bombastic pop sound. And again, all of these sounds are from the new Y2K pack. Literally every single one that we're going to use in this video is from that pack. So I did that, and then I'm just adding a couple of extra background auxiliary drums. So I added this little cowbell and this little ride cymbal. So now total, we have a nice little intro, and we have a nice little kind of first initial instrumental interlude. So let's move on to a verse that I can actually start writing melodies over, because I want something a little bit more calm than this. Let's go ahead and let's talk about what I want to do for the actual verse drums. I want them to kind of follow that same swung rhythm, but we're going to swap out the kick and the snare because I want something that feels a little bit more kind of like MPC drum patty. So we have this kick called Luda, and we have this snare called Love Me. It is like legitimately identical to all of those boy band snares of the late 90s, and then we just have some hi-hats. So here's what we have for the drums. For hi-hats, we just have this steady one up here. And then we also layered this one in very quietly, just giving us that kind of swung movement. And that's going to give us that kind of New Jack Swing inspired sound. So I feel pretty good about that. And then what I'm going to do is, as I move into the second half of this verse, I'm just building it up quite a bit. So we're going to layer up some shakers on the left and right, doing that same swung movement. And then I'm going to pull in a clap to kind of add a build. Let's go ahead and let's start laying down a bass line, because I feel like that's really going to drive this verse home. For the bass on this, I wanted to use a slap bass, so we have a preset in here called Will Smith, and I wanted to just kind of do a different chord progression that's not so kind of harmonic minor, similar to like the one that we had for that instrumental interlude. So here's what we're going with. And now I'm going to layer some keys under that so we can kind of build this up. And then that should be pretty good for a verse. Most of the verses are pretty sparse. All right, for verse synths, what we're going to do is I actually wanted to kind of add in some chords. So we have these nice little triads that just fall into that like A sharp natural minor key that we're in. And again, we're going to have some kind of notes that fall out. So like those passing notes for the big string hits and stuff. But don't worry about that yet. So we have this little digital string. Nice little kind of like pad S string. We have this little brass. And what I'm doing is I'm automating up this cutoff as we go. And then we have this little Swedish E piano, and this is just going to give us a nice little top melody. And we are also automating some cutoff on this. So now all together, we have a nice New Jack Swing inspired 90s, early 2000s boy band verse. Let's talk about structure. So Max Martin is a big fan of doing kind of melodic math. We've talked about it a little bit on the channel, but essentially he's going to change up everything about every 4 or 8 bars. So what we do is we have a little, it's actually a 5-bar intro because we added an extra extension, but 5-bar intro, 4-bar musical interlude. Now we're going to do an 8-bar verse. We're going to do an 8-bar pre-chorus, and then we're going to do either an 8 or 16-bar verse. Now we can actually start focusing on this pre-chorus, and then we can figure out what we want to do for the actual hook. Like I said, Max Martin likes to change it up, and what he'll do is he'll kind of invert chord progressions. So we're kind of running down in the A natural minor. So we were going. But let's flip that on its head. So we have this bass patch called Sickening from the Y2K pack. And again, all of these Vital presets work on the free version of Vital. So if you can use VSTs in your DAW, basically if you're in anything besides Pro Tools, I think, you can download Vital for free and you can use all of these. But here's a chord progression that we're going with. I want something to kind of build up. Yep. Resolve / like build up to what's going to become the chorus. And then for synths, we're leaving this pretty open. So we just have this brass patch called DuckTales. It's a much shorter and softer brass. And then we have these E piano shimmer keys. So it's really pretty. It's going to basically just completely change the vibe from verse to pre-chorus, so then we can come into a huge chorus. So let me go ahead and add different effects and fillers and things like that, and then we're going to work on the chorus. I don't want to add too many effects. I'm just adding these 2 long risers, so a tonal riser and then kind of just like a nice sharp riser. We're going to add a little telephone effect, and then I made this like little glitchy fill using a couple different toms and zaps out of Y2K. Then we're going to go into a big chorus. So let's go ahead and let's flesh out the chorus drums, and then we'll figure it out from there. Here's what we have for the chorus drums. The only thing we really added that's completely new is like this kind of backbeat sizzle in our auxiliary drums. But other than that, here's what we have. So you can see that we play a lot with backbeat elements. So we have these backbeat hi-hats, we have these little backbeat cowbells, we have that little backbeat snare. That's a big thing in Max Martin productions of the late 90s and early 2000s. It's filling up the percussion with things that don't really crowd it, but they act as these nice little bits of like ear candy or auxiliary percussion. Now that we have that, let's figure out what our bass line and chord progression is going to be, and then we'll flesh this out. Okay, we're going to do a whole new chord progression because I want to change it. Again, we're in that melodic math. So we have that Will Smith slap bass preset from earlier, and then we have the Out of Sync preset, but I'm just doing a little bit of extra filtering on this one. So a little bit of slant EQ, but nothing too wild. Let's go ahead and add the synths just to kind of fill that out. So for synths, what we're doing is we have this little string run. Using that Martin Special from earlier, we're using that harp on synth from earlier as well, just doing hits on the backbeat. And then we have this bring in the house piano. Adding a nice little bit of steady movement, and then let's move on to new stuff. So we have this little space clavinet. This is a really cool little preset. Doing that back piano. Similar to what the harp on is doing, so they're kind of just acting as these nice little bits of backbeat. Again, it's all about call and response movement with all of these kind of productions. Then we have the oops piano, which is basically the oops, I did it again, big piano hits. I believe doing what the house piano is doing. Super bright, super compressed, super saturated. And then I noticed it in a lot of Max Martin and Timbaland songs from the late 90s and early 2000s. There's these kind of like gated arps that just kind of sit behind the instrumental. So that's what we have here. It's just synth arp 2, and we're just playing that chord progression. And then I noticed that pretty much every producer of this generation loved using these like sine wave, kind of G-funk-esque synth leads, and so we're doing that, and we pan this one over to the left. Just to give us another little bit of counter melody. So here's what we have so far. I'm gonna add probably some orchestra hits and effects in 1 second. Now let's add the effects in those big orchestra hits because that'll help a ton. Let's look at this little effects subgroup right here because this makes a huge difference. So we have an impact, we have an exhaust hit, we have another exhaust hit, another exhaust hit, and a big cymbal crash. On top of that, we have those big kind of Max Martin orchestra stabs that you hear all through the kind of decade. And it just adds a nice little bit of punch. So now here's what we have for what's going to be the chorus. And now let's have a little post-chorus. I think we're basically going to do what we did in the intro. I'm just going to build it up a little bit more. So I'll show you all the things that I add, but just assume we're going to copy and paste that. All right, so for this post-chorus, we've just got those same kind of exhaust effects that we use for the chorus. We're going back to that out-of-sync bass that we had from the intro. And then for keys, you can kind of see nothing's that new. We're just layering everything a bit more. And again, those are all the synths that we've kind of already used. We're using the same drums, but what I did is I went in and automated some little filters. I automated some little cutouts. So if I open up the automation, this was kind of just a big point to get it to sound finished. So you can see right here that we're going to automate quite a bit of the kind of drums and percussion. We're going to automate some of these little synth leads in the start. So it's going to sound a little bit different at the end, but you'll hear a preview once we add vocals. But let's go ahead and add vocals so then we can hear this entire thing. All right, let's dive straight into the first little vocal that's going to be the verse. So I went with a single vocal for most of the verse. A lot of the time, the verses of the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC songs is like one of the vocalists takes it, next vocalist will take the next 8 bars, and then they'll kind of just layer in harmonies and ad-libs here and there. So the main vocal is essentially just the Lauten Eden going in through my HA81A preamp, going in through an AudioScape 1176 Revision D compressor, and then into my RME interface. And here's what it sounds like with nothing on it, and then I'll show you with the chain.
I know you gave me the run around.
And then I just added some auto-tune compression, and I added like the same kind of synths that we do all the time.
I know you gave me the run around.
Their vocals back then were pretty compressed. So we're using one vocal throughout the entire thing, and then we're going to supplement that with call and response vocals and little layers.
I know you gave me the run around. I saw you sneaking with him.
Let's add in some of those extra layers. So we have a little answer vocal here. I did this little bit crushing effect that Max Martin used on the like Digital Get Down song and Dirty Pop. He used a lot of bit crusher in the kind of early 2000s. It's essentially just a lead vocal with RC20 on it with a ton of bit crushing, a little bit of distortion, and a ton of reverb. So we use that throughout as like a response. And then I did layer up the vocals on these like last little phrases. So we have a left vocal and a right vocal and harmonies. And they're a little bit more wet than the lead vocal. So I'm sending the delay and the reverb a little bit harder on these.
Sneaking with him. Don't you get tired of holding down all of these secrets within? Yeah.
So now we're going to go to this little pre-chorus or verse B, whatever you want to call it. So for this, we're layering up the vocals through the whole thing. I wanted it to feel a little bit wider and bigger. So we have the lead vocal and then the left vocal and the right vocal doing the same thing.
Yeah, I was warned a couple of times. You had reputations with guys, but I just thought that this would be different. So where were you on all?
We're going to add in some ad-libs just to do a little bit of Justin Timberlake, JC Chavez, kind of, Nick Carter-esque, whatever the lead man wants to do in these.
Whoa, whoa.
And then we have some response.
All those nights.
And we're layering those a little bit with a harmony.
Whoa, all those nights by your side.
Now, let's hear this in action.
Guys, but I just thought that this would be different. So where were you on all of those nights? Were you laying right by his side? Now tell me the truth, I'm listening.
Now let's go into the chorus vocal production. So for this, I have this vocal already printed, but I can show you the layers if you want to see them.
Just stop.
Now that literally has nothing on it because all of the effects were printed, but I went ahead and hid all of these because it was just cluttering the session, but I might as well kind of knock them out because we're already here, right? So let's go ahead and take a listen. So we have a lead vocal right here.
Just stop.
In a high octave, we have this.
Just stop.
In a low octave, both of those have a doubler on them, but that's the only thing. The rest is just my normal vocal effect. Then we have a left and a right vocal.
Just stop.
Of the low octave. And a harmony.
Just stop.
Nope, not a harmony. It's actually just another one just to kind of like draw the illusion of 4 or 5 members. Here's a harmony though.
Just stop.
There we go. And then I believe this is a higher octave.
Just stop.
Nope, another harmony. So here's what we have all together. Basically, it's just like a 3-part harmony with some layers.
Just stop.
Then we're doing it again.
On top. Just stop.
And then I essentially just printed that so it didn't absolutely demolish my CPU because I don't need all of these. They sound perfect as is, so I'm just going to disable them back. And then we're going to hide them again. And essentially, they're all just printed. So in a lot of these 90s and early 2000s boy band songs, there's a lot of call and response in the chorus. So it'll be like big chant from the whole group. And then whatever member or two is going to take the kind of lead melody, they'll sit on the back. So that's exactly what we did here. We have the just stop, the on top, and then back to just stop. And we're filling the middle with kind of the substance of this hook.
Just stop. I gave you all of me and always put you on top, but it was never enough.
So for the chorus leads, we have the lead, left and right, center.
I gave you all of me and always put you.
I could probably bring these up a little bit, honestly.
I gave you all of me and always put you.
Yeah, that feels a little bit better. And then we have the low version.
I gave you all of me and always put you.
And now all together, we have this.
Just stop. I gave you all of me and always put you on top, but it was never enough. Just stop playing these games with my head and my heart. So tell me why do all the things seem to always fall apart?
Now, the last little vocal that I'll show you is these little AO chants. I basically just shouted AO like 30 times in my room, comped them all together, and then printed it.
A-O, A.
And then I have Always Fall Apart as like a little response, and here's what it sounded like.
Always fall apart.
But I went ahead and added Throat by Autotune, just to give us a little bit of that formant control. I added some bit crushing and distortion with RC20 again, and then I added a big delay throw with repeater, and we just get this nice little
Always fall apart.
And then we're back to the AOs. And that is everything that went into the song. Now, let's go ahead and let's take a full listen. I feel like it's not that authentic because I'm not going to be doing a choreographed dance to it. But if you want to see a choreographed dance, let us know. Maybe I can follow up on Instagram. If you don't follow us, it's just Make Pop Music on Instagram. So if you want to see me do a choreographed dance to my version of a 90s and 2000s boy band song, let me know. But here is a full preview. Again, all of the sounds in this are from our brand new Y2K pack. So check it out.
With him, don't you get tired of holding down all of these secrets within? Yeah, I was warned a couple of times. You had reputations with guys, but I just thought that this would be different. So where were you on all of those nights? Were you laying right by his side? Now tell me the truth, I'm listening. Just stop. I gave you all of me and always put you on top, but it was never enough. Just stop playing these games with my head and my heart. So tell me why do all the things seem to always fall apart?
And there you go. That is how you make a song like a 90s and 2000s boy band. There are a ton of different subgenres, so if y'all want to see us tackle more like a kind of like a Backstreet Boys ballad, or if you want to see us tackle like a Pharrell song, I know it's not boy band, but Pharrell was kind of like the king of the early 2000s as well. Let us know. There is a lot that we can do from this decade of pop music, so hopefully you like this video. Again, make sure you go check out the Y2K pack on makepopmusic.com. It is on sale right now. It's $30 at the intro price, but after that, it's going to go up to $40, 511 samples, 105 synth presets, all royalty free. They're absolutely insane. There was like pretty much no mixing on anything in this video, and all of the sounds were from that. So go check it out. Other than that, let us know what you want to see in the comments down below. We'll be back next week with much more content, and until then, we'll see you later. Much love, everyone. Peace.